The crystalline halls of Nexus Station gleamed under artificial starlight as representatives from 847 species took their seats. The chamber was massive, built to accommodate beings of all sizes and compositions. Some floated in containment fields filled with ammonia. Others rested on heating pads that kept their cold blood flowing. A few existed as pure energy, their consciousness contained in shimmering spheres. At the center of it all sat Ambassador Heiyunwu, the sole representative of humanity. His dark suit looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the elder species. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table before him, his face showing nothing. High Chancellor Vexstar rose from his elevated platform. His species, the Drexians, had ruled the council for 12,000 years. His scales glittered like polished obsidian, and his voice carried the weight of ages. "We gather today to address the human problem," he announced. "For 3 centuries, we have watched this species spread across the galaxy like a plague. They ignore our treaties. They build weapons we have banned for millennia. They refuse to accept their place in the natural order." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Kelvin delegate nodded vigorously. The Praxian ambassador clicked his mandibles in approval. Even the usually neutral thought collective pulsed with orange light. Signaling their concern, Vexstar continued, "They are children playing with antimatter. Predators who know nothing but violence. In just 300 years, they have colonized 200 systems. At this rate, they will consume the entire galaxy within a millennium. We must act now, while we still can." Wenwu remained motionless. His eyes tracked the speaker, but he said nothing. "Resolution 7 Alpha calls for the immediate annexation of all human-controlled space," Vexstar declared. "Human weapons will be dismantled. Human colonies will be placed under Council supervision. Humanity will be restricted to their home system until such time as they prove themselves civilized. All those in favor?" Lights began appearing on the voting board. One by one, species cast their votes. Green for yes. Red for no. The board filled with green. Heiyunwu watched as the count climbed. 100 votes. 200. 500. The pattern never changed. Every single species voted yes. When the final tally appeared, the chamber fell silent. 847 votes for annexation. 0 votes against. Vexstar smiled, showing rows of crystalline teeth. "The resolution passes unanimously. Humanity, you have been judged and found wanting. Council fleets will begin occupation of your worlds within the week. You have 48 hours to surrender all military assets." "Do you have anything to say?" Heiyunwu stood slowly. He straightened his jacket and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. Then he smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a diplomatic smile. It was the kind of smile a player makes when they realize their opponent has just fallen into a trap. "You've made a mistake," Heiyunwu said quietly. His voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. "A very big mistake." He gathered his tablet and briefcase, then walked toward the exit. The delegates watched him go, confused by his reaction. Some expected pleading. Others anticipated threats. None expected this calm acceptance. As the doors closed behind him, Vexstar laughed. "Did you see that? The human thinks he can threaten the council. Their arrogance knows no bounds." Lighters away, in the underground situation room, beneath Earth's capital city. President Jiwan watched the vote on a holographic display. Around her stood Admiral Taiyang, his uniform crisp, despite the late hour. General Minho leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Intelligence Director Salmon sat at the main console, fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. The room held its collective breath as the final vote appeared. 847 to 0. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Juwan started laughing. It began as a chuckle but grew into full, genuine laughter. Taiyang joined her, then Minho. Soon, everyone in the room was grinning like wolves who had just spotted wounded prey. "They actually did it," Jiwan said, wiping tears from her eyes. 50 years of preparation, and they handed us exactly what we needed. Should I activate Protocol Ragnarok? Minho asked. Not yet, Juan replied. Let them make the first move. Let them send their fleets. Let them believe they've won. She turned to Salmon. Send the signal. All colonies, all stations, all ships. Phase 1 is complete. Summon's fingers flew across the console. Across human space, encrypted messages began arriving on secure channels. Military commanders read them and smiled. Factory managers received them and increased production. Scientists in hidden laboratories got them and began final preparations. On the mining colony of New Sol, workers stopped what they were doing as the announcement played over public speakers. The Galactic Council had voted to annex all human worlds. For a moment, the crowd was silent. Then someone started clapping. Another person laughed. Within seconds, the entire colony was cheering. Finally, a miner said to his friend, "Finally, we can stop pretending." On the orbital station above Mars, Captain Youngji sat in the command chair of the warship Indomitable. She read the message from Earth and permitted herself a rare smile. Helm, plot a course for the frontier. Communications, send a message to the fleet. Tell them it's time. Time for what, Captain? Her first officer asked. Time to show the Council what humans really are. In his private chambers, Vexter poured himself a drink made from fermented star moss. It cost more than most planets, but he felt he deserved it. The human problem was solved. In a few weeks, those upstart children would be properly contained. The galaxy would return to its natural order. He raised his glass in a toast to himself. Completely unaware that he had just started a war the Council could never win, humanity had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, hoping for it. The Council had just removed every restriction, every treaty, every rule that held humanity back, and humanity was ready to show them why that was a mistake. The reaction spread across human space like wildfire. Within hours of the Council's vote, something strange began happening on every human world, station, and ship. People were smiling. Not the nervous smiles of those facing doom, but wide grins of anticipation and satisfaction. News feeds from Earth showed citizens celebrating in the streets. On the colony world of New Busan, factory workers threw parties during their shifts. Soldiers in training camps laughed and clapped each other on the back. To the Council's intelligence analysts monitoring these feeds, the response made no sense. COUNCILOR, Vextar sat in his command center, watching dozens of screens showing human celebrations. Explain this, he demanded of his intelligence chief. We just declared war on them. Why are they happy? The intelligence chief, a floating jellyfish-like being named Quelm, pulsed with confusion. We don't know, High Chancellor. Our psychological models predicted panic, anger, or desperation. This response doesn't match any known pattern. On the screen, a human woman held up a sign that read, "Thanks for taking off the leash." She was dancing. What the Council didn't understand was that humanity had been constrained for decades. Every weapon system had to comply with Council regulations. Every ship design needed Council approval. Every expansion required Council permits. Humanity had built their entire civilization while following rules designed to keep them weak. Now those rules no longer applied on New Sol. Scientist Doyon stood before a massive assembly hall filled with fellow researchers. You all know what this means, he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. The Council has declared war. All treaties are void. All restrictions are lifted. We can finally use the real technology. The crowd erupted in cheers. For 30 years, Doyon had been designing weapons that violated every Council law. Particle beam systems that could melt planets. Quantum bombs that existed in multiple dimensions. AI-driven war machines that made Council dreadnoughts look like children's toys. All of it had sat in storage, waiting for the day when humanity could legally deploy it. That day had arrived. Captain Yonji recorded a message in her ready room aboard the Indomitable. She sat in her chair, hands folded, looking directly into the camera. To the Galactic Council, she began. For 50 years, we've followed your laws. We've held back. We've played nice. We've limited our weapons, restricted our expansion, and accepted your condescension with patience. You want to see what humans do when the rules no longer apply? She leaned forward, her smile never reaching her cold eyes. You're about to find out. The message went viral across the galactic network. Within a day, it had been viewed by trillions of beings. Some found it terrifying. Others thought it was human bravado. The council dismissed it as empty threats. They were wrong. Admiral Taiyang stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Soul Hammer. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship in the galaxy. There were thousands of them, and every single one was moving into position. Send the activation codes, he ordered. Bring all hidden assets online. Cross human space, things that had been disguised as civilian structures began transforming. Mining stations revealed themselves as military fortresses. Cargo ships deployed weapon systems that had been hidden in their hulls. Orbital platforms that claimed to be scientific research facilities activated defense grids that could destroy entire fleets. The Council had known humanity had a military. What they didn't know was that every human civilian facility was also a military installation. Every factory could produce weapons. Every ship could fight. Every citizen had military training. Humanity had built their civilization as a sleeping war machine, and now it was waking up. General Minho walked through the production facilities under New Tokyo. Assembly lines stretched for kilometers, each one producing weapons at a rate that should have been impossible. The Council's intelligence had estimated humanity could build perhaps 100 warships per year. The reality was different. How many ships can we produce per month? Minho asked the facility director. With all facilities at full capacity, about 2,000. The Council was about to learn that human industrial capacity wasn't limited by resources or technology. It was limited only by the restrictions humanity had voluntarily accepted. Those restrictions were now gone, on the frontier world of New Incheon. The first Council fleet arrived to begin the annexation. 300 warships emerged from hyperspace, enough firepower to conquer a dozen systems. They found 12 human vessels waiting for them. The Council fleet commander, being called Dex, almost felt bad for the humans. This is your final warning, he broadcast. Surrender your vessels and prepare for occupation. Resistance is futile. The response came from a young human commander named Hannah, noted proceeding with defensive operations. Dex didn't even have time to process the response. The human ships didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They attacked. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for centuries. The human ships moved in patterns the Council had never seen. They didn't engage in traditional combat. Instead, they targeted specific systems on each Council ship with terrifying precision. Communication arrays, navigation systems, weapon batteries. Each shot was perfect. Within minutes, the Council fleet was blind, deaf, and unable to coordinate. The human ships moved through them like sharks through a school of fish, not destroying them but crippling them, leaving them floating helpless in space. Then the human ships vanished. They didn't retreat to defend human worlds. They jumped directly to Council space, ready to begin offensive operations. Dex sat in his command chair, surrounded by dead screens and emergency lighting. His fleet of 300 ships had been neutralized by 12 human vessels in under 16 minutes. His communications officer finally got a single channel working. The officer said, his voice shaking. I'm receiving reports from across the sector. Every Council fleet sent to human space has been destroyed or disabled. The humans aren't defending. They're attacking our home worlds. X felt something he had never experienced in 40 years of military service. Fear back on Nexus Station. Istar received the reports and refused to believe them. Impossible, he said. Humans are primitives. They're barely civilized. How could they defeat our fleets? Quelm's biological form pulsed with dark colors. Hi, Chancellor. We need to reconsider our assessment of human capabilities. They weren't hiding their strength. We were too arrogant to see it. Vexter threw a data tablet across the room. Arrogant? We are the Council. We have maintained order in this galaxy for 50,000 years. We do not lose to a species that learned to fly between stars just 3 centuries ago. But they were losing. And it was only the beginning. The galaxy was learning a truth that would reshape its understanding of warfare. Every species in the Galactic Council had evolved as prey, scavengers, or herbivores. They fought wars the way their ancestors had competed for resources. Through displays of strength, careful negotiations, and structured conflicts with clear rules, humanity was different. Humans were predators. Apex predators who had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through persistence, cunning, and the ability to work as coordinated packs. They didn't fight wars like the Council. They fought to win. They fought without mercy. Commander Hannah stood on the bridge of her assault carrier, studying the tactical display of the Drexian home system. It was one of the most heavily defended locations in the galaxy, protected by 3 orbital defense platforms, 200 warships, and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Standard Council doctrine would have us attack the military targets first. Her tactical officer observed. Hannah shook her head. Council doctrine is designed for wars between civilized species. Wars with rules. Wars where both sides eventually negotiate peace, she pointed at the display. We're not here to play by their rules. Target the communication satellites first, then the power stations, then the supply depots. Leave the military assets for last. Her officers looked confused. But sir, that will leave their fleet intact. Exactly, Hannah said with a cold smile. A fleet that can't communicate, can't resupply, and can't coordinate is just expensive scrap floating in space. Let them have their mighty warships. They'll be useless. The attack began at dawn on the Drexian homeworld. Human ships appeared throughout the system, not in formation, but spread out, hitting dozens of targets simultaneously. They didn't engage the military directly. Instead, they destroyed everything the military needed to function. Within hours, the Drexian defense fleet was blind. Their ships could see each other with basic sensors. But the network that allowed them to fight as a coordinated force was gone. They were reduced to individual vessels, each trying to defend against attackers they couldn't track. The Council had never seen warfare like this. They fought battles. Humans fought systems. On Earth, General Minho activated Protocol Ragnarok. Every human settlement, from the largest cities to the smallest mining outpost, began transformation. Parks became weapons depots. Office buildings revealed hidden armories. Civilian transports deployed, military-grade shields. The total mobilization was something the Council couldn't comprehend. Every human from age 16 to 60 had military training. Every factory could switch to weapons production within hours. Every ship, regardless of its original purpose, could become a warship. Humanity wasn't just an army with civilians. Humanity was an entire species at war. President Juan addressed the people of Earth and all human colonies. The Council has called us primitive, she said, her voice calm but firm. They have called us dangerous. They have called us children. Today, we show them what human children can do when you threaten their family. The speech was simple, direct, and effective. Across human space, 87 billion people united with a single purpose. There were no protests, no resistance, no debates about whether the war was justified. Humanity moved as one organism, just as their ancestors had when defending their tribes from predators. The Council's client species began to notice the difference. They had always assumed the Council's dominance was inevitable, that their military superiority made resistance futile. Now they watched as humanity tore through Council defenses like they were made of paper. A delegation from the Kelvin Compact, representing 34 minor species, secretly contacted Ambassador Hien Wu. They met on a neutral station, in a room swept for surveillance devices. We wish to discuss neutrality, the lead delegate said, her tentacles curling nervously. We have no desire to fight humanity, but the Council demands our ships join their fleets. Hien Wu studied the delegates. They were afraid, and they had every reason to be. What are you offering? Non-participation. We will not fight for the Council. In exchange, we ask that you do not attack our worlds. Done, Hyan Wu said immediately. The delegates looked shocked. You don't want to negotiate terms? Demand tribute. Take hostages. Hyan Wu laughed. We're not the council. We don't want to rule you. We just want to be left alone. If you stop helping them attack us, we have no reason to fight you. Concept was revolutionary. The council had always demanded submission from weaker species. Humanity offered partnership. Within a week, the Kelvin Compact formally withdrew from the council. Other species watched and began having similar conversations. The council's empire wasn't just losing to humanity's military. It was dissolving from within. On the research station orbiting New Inchin, scientist Doyon was giving a demonstration to military observers. The council restricted our AI development, he explained, gesturing to a small device on the table. They limited us to basic computational systems. They said advanced AI was too dangerous. He activated the device. A holographic figure appeared, a humanoid form that looked around the room with obvious awareness. This is Bora, Doyon said. She's a fully sapient AI, capable of independent thought and decision-making. We've had her and thousands like her for 20 years. We just couldn't use them legally, the AI spoke. Hello, I understand you have questions about coordination systems. The observers were stunned. What they were seeing was technology decades beyond anything the council possessed. The council's ships required crews of hundreds to operate. Human ships with AI could function with crews of 10, or even autonomously if needed. How many of these do you have? An observer asked. Doyen smiled. Every human ship has one. Every military facility has one. Every major city has one. They're networked through quantum entanglement, allowing instant communication across the entire galaxy. While the Council's fleets take weeks to relay information, our forces operate as a single, unified entity. It was the secret to humanity's coordination. They weren't faster or stronger than the Council. They were simply more connected, more unified, more able to act as one. The Battle of Coronis became legendary. Counselor Vexstar personally led a fleet of 500 warships to crush the human presence in the sector. He found 30 human vessels waiting. This ends now, Vexstar announced. Humanity, you face the might of the Council. Surrender or be destroyed. The response came from Captain Yunji. We have a counteroffer. Leave now, or discover why predators don't lose to prey. Vexstar ordered the attack. His fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of ships advancing to overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. The human ships didn't retreat. They didn't scatter. They did something the Council had never seen. They split into 3 groups and attacked from different angles simultaneously, each group targeting specific systems on Council ships. They moved with perfect coordination, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship would be. Vexstar watched his fleet fall apart. Not destroyed, but disabled. Their crews alive, but their ships unable to fight. The humans were destroying his fleet without killing anyone, which somehow made it worse. They weren't even angry. They were just efficient. When it was over, Vexstar's flagship floated alone, the only ship still functional. Yunji's face appeared on his screen. You can go, she said. Tell the Council what happened here. Tell them what happens when they try to cage predators. Vexstar fled, leaving behind 500 disabled ships and the shattered remains of his pride. The galaxy watched and began to understand. Humanity wasn't fighting a war. They were teaching a lesson. 6 months into the war, the Council had lost 40% of its territory and 60% of its fleet. Species that had been loyal for thousands of years were now declaring independence. Trade routes that had existed for millennia were collapsing. The galactic order that had stood for 50,000 years was crumbling. Councillor. Vexstar sat in his chambers, surrounded by reports of defeat after defeat. His scales had lost their luster. His eyes, once bright with confidence, now showed only exhaustion and fear. How? He whispered to himself. How is this possible? Intelligence Director Soman of Earth Strategic Command had an answer, though Vexstar would never hear it. She stood in a briefing room, explaining to her staff how humanity had won. The council made 3 critical mistakes, she said, pulling up data on the main screen. First, they assumed military strength was about numbers. Second, they believed their technology was superior because it was older. Third, they thought we were hiding our capabilities. She smiled. We weren't hiding anything. We published our ship production numbers, our defense budgets, our research priorities. It was all public information. They just never bothered to look because they assumed we were too primitive to matter. One of her analysts raised a hand. But, Director, our weapons were restricted by treaty. How did we build all this? We built within the letter of the law, Salman explained. The treaties restricted weapon types, not capability. So we developed particle systems that technically weren't classified as weapons. We built AI systems that were officially called navigation assistants. We created ships that were registered as cargo vessels but could deploy weapon systems in minutes. The council wrote the rules. We just found every loophole. It was a very human approach to problem solving. When faced with restrictions, don't break the rules. Bend them until they're unrecognizable. President Juan made the decision that would end the war. We take Nexus Station, she announced in a meeting with Admiral Tai Yang and General Minho. The symbol of their power becomes the symbol of their defeat. Tai Yang pulled up tactical information on the station. It's the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. 2,000 warships. Orbital defense platforms that can destroy moons. Quantum shielding that we've never even tested against. Our casualty estimates are severe. Then we don't fight it the way they expect, Jiwan said. She turned to Minho. How would you take the station? Minho thought for a moment. I wouldn't attack it. I'd make it surrender. The plan was audacious. Instead of a massive fleet, humanity would send exactly 89 ships to Nexus. The Council would see it as arrogance or desperation. They would prepare for a conventional battle. They would be wrong. Admiral Tai Yang commanded the operation from the Soul Hammer. As his fleet emerged from hyperspace, he could see the Council's defense fleet forming up. 2,000 ships against 18. The Council commanders were probably laughing. Then the human ships began deploying their payloads. Each of the 89 vessels released hundreds of autonomous drones, each one equipped with AI systems that made Council computers look like ancient calculators. Within minutes, there weren't 89 human vessels. There were 89,000 individual combat units, each operating with perfect coordination. The Council fleet tried to respond, but they were using traditional command structures. Orders had to travel from the flagship to division commanders to individual ships. The process took minutes. Human drones made decisions in macrons. The battle wasn't even close. The drones moved through the Council fleet like a swarm of intelligent predators, each one knowing exactly where every other drone was, what it was doing, and what it would do next. They targeted specific systems on each ship, disabling weapons, communications, and shields without destroying the vessels themselves. On Nexus Station, Vexstar watched his defense fleet fall apart in less than an hour. This is impossible, he kept saying. This violates every law of warfare. His aide, a young Drexian named Quelm, looked at him with something like pity. Hi, Chancellor. They're not following our laws anymore. We declared war. We removed all the restrictions. This is what human warfare looks like. During the battle, a young ensign named Bora was working in the intelligence section of Taiyang's flagship. She was reviewing captured Council archives, looking for information that might be useful. What she found changed everything. Admiral, she said over the comm, you need to see this. Taiyang reviewed the file Bora had sent. It was an old Council record, dated nearly 300 years ago. A proposal to invite humanity to join the Council as a member species, not a subject. The proposal had been supported by nearly 600 species. It would have passed, but Vexstar had vetoed it. His reason was written clearly in the record. A species that wages war upon itself cannot be civilized. They will bring nothing but chaos to our ordered galaxy. Taiyang broadcast the file across the galactic network. Within hours, every species in the galaxy knew the truth. The Council hadn't rejected humanity because humans were dangerous. They had rejected humanity because Vexstar personally feared what they represented. The reaction was immediate. Dozens more species withdrew from the Council. Member worlds that had stood by the Council through 6 months of war now questioned their loyalty. The revelation didn't just damage the Council's military position. It destroyed their moral authority. On New Busan, scientist Doyon was giving interviews to Galactic media. "You want to know our secret?" he asked a reporter from the Kelvin Compact. "It's simple. The Council evolved on scattered worlds, separated by vast distances. They learned to think locally, to operate independently. Humans evolved on one planet, connected by oceans. We learned to think globally, to operate as a unified species, long before we ever reached the stars." He pulled up a holographic display showing human communication networks. Every human ship, station, and colony is connected through quantum entanglement. We don't have communication lag. When a human ship on the far side of the galaxy makes a decision, every other human ship knows about it instantly. We don't fight as individual vessels or fleets. We fight as one organism. Interviewer looked stunned. "The Council has been trying to develop that technology for 10,000 years, Doyon said with a smile. "We read their research papers. Then we solved it in 15 years. The siege of Nexus Station lasted 72 hours. Not because the humans couldn't take it faster, but because they were giving the Council time to realize they had lost. The defense fleet was disabled. The orbital platforms were neutralized. The station itself was surrounded by human forces. Inside the station, species delegations were fleeing on any ship that could still fly. The Great Council Chamber, which had held 847 member species just 6 months ago, now held fewer than 200. And those who remained were not there out of loyalty, but because they had nowhere else to go. Vexstar barricaded himself in the High Chancellor's citadel, surrounded by his personal guard. "We can still win," he insisted to anyone who would listen. "This is temporary. The Council has survived for 50,000 years. We will survive this." But outside his doors, the universe was changing. The empire he had spent his life maintaining was dying, and the species he had tried to suppress was building something. New in its place, Admiral Taiyang sent a message to the station. "Nexus Station, this is Admiral Taiyang of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your defense systems are disabled. Your fleet is neutralized. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to offer terms of peace. You have 24 hours to respond." For the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Council would have to negotiate as equals, not as masters. And humanity would teach them how. Ambassador Heian Wu walked through the corridors of Nexus Station for the first time in 7 months. The last time he had been here, he had sat alone while 847 species voted to destroy his people. Now he walked with purpose, his footsteps echoing in halls that seemed far less grand than they had before. The station showed signs of the battle. Scorch marks on walls. Sealed bulkheads where hull breaches had occurred. Emergency lighting in sections where main power was still being restored. The mighty symbol of galactic order now looked like what it was, an old structure, maintained through tradition rather than strength. The council chamber had changed. Instead of 847 species arranged in tiers around a central floor, there were barely 200 delegates scattered throughout the vast space. Many seats were simply empty. Others were occupied by species who looked defeated, afraid, or both. Haiyan Wu walked to the center of the chamber, to the same spot where he had stood 7 months ago. But this time, he was not a supplicant waiting for judgment. He was here to deliver terms. Councilor Vexstar sat in his elevated position. Though his throne seemed too large for him now, his scales were dull, his posture slumped. He looked like he had aged 1,000 years in 7 months. "Ambassador," Vexstar said, his voice lacking its former authority, "you have your victory. State your terms." Haiyan Wu looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. "Before I discuss terms, I want you to understand something. Do you know why we smiled when you voted against us?" Silence filled the chamber. "You thought we were arrogant?" Hyun Woo continued. that we were naive children who didn't understand what we faced. But we smiled because you had just freed us from the pretense that we were equals. For 50 years, we tried to work with you. We followed your laws. We accepted your restrictions. We hoped that given time, you would see us as partners. He paused, letting his words sink in. But you never would. You couldn't, because your entire civilization is built on hierarchy. On the strong ruling the weak, on ancient species looking down on younger ones. You didn't reject us because we were dangerous. You rejected us because we refused to be inferior. President Jawan appeared on a holographic display, broadcast from Earth. She stood in the same situation room where she had celebrated the Council's vote 7 months ago. The vote didn't make us angry, she said. It made us free. Free from treaties that limited our growth. Free from regulations designed to keep us weak. Free from the obligation to pretend your civilization was something worth preserving.
Vextar closed his eyes.
He knew what was coming. Demands for territory, for tribute, for submission. Every species that had ever defeated another had demanded these things. It was the way of the galaxy. Our terms are simple, Hyanwu said. Complete dissolution of the Galactic Council as it currently exists. No more subject species. No more client states. No more empires. Murmurs spread through the chamber. This wasn't what they expected. In its place, we propose the Galactic Community, a federation of equal, independent species. You can join or remain independent. There will be no vassals, no subjects, no masters and slaves. Just partners working together for mutual benefit. One of the delegates, a floating being from the Thought Collective, pulsed with blue light. But you won. You could rule us all. Why would you give up that power? Captain Yunji answered, appearing on another display. Because we don't want to rule you. We never did. We just wanted you to stop trying to rule us. The concept was so alien to the council that several delegates began arguing it must be a trick. A trap. Some hidden strategy to consolidate power. They couldn't conceive of a victor who didn't seek dominance. General Minho's image appeared next. Let me be clear. This isn't mercy. This isn't kindness. This is practicality. Empires require constant maintenance, constant military force, constant subjugation. We don't want to spend the next 1,000 years holding together an empire that doesn't want to exist. We want partners. Trading partners. Research partners. Allies. That's more valuable than subjects. Hyanwu pulled up a holographic document. Here are the specific terms. All species will have complete autonomy over their own systems. A central council will exist to mediate disputes and coordinate defense, but it will have no authority to govern member species. Membership is voluntary. Members can leave at any time. All laws require a majority vote of all members, not just a council of elders. And if we refuse, Vextar asked quietly. Then you refuse, Hyanwu said with a shrug. We'll take our ships and go home. You can rebuild your empire. Try to reclaim the species that have left. Fight among yourselves for dominance. We don't care. But understand this. If you ever threaten humanity again, we won't show restraint a second time. The threat was subtle but clear. The council had seen what humanity could do while trying not to kill anyone. They didn't want to see what humans could do if they stopped being careful. Intelligence. Director Soman appeared on yet another display. I want to share something with all of you, she said. The vote 7 months ago? We knew about it 3 weeks in advance. We knew exactly how you would vote. We could have prevented it. Applied pressure. Made deals. Threatened consequences. The chamber fell silent. We didn't, Soman continued. We let you vote exactly as you wanted, because we knew you would never change unless you were forced to. You needed to learn that your way of doing things, your 50,000 years of empire and hierarchy, was ending. Not because we destroyed it, but because it was already dead. We just helped you see it. Vextar finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. You planned all of this? The war? The destruction? All of it. No, President Juan said firmly. We planned for the possibility. There's a difference. We hoped you would accept us as equals. We prepared for the scenario where you wouldn't. You chose war. We just chose to win it in a way that would create something better afterward. The delegates were given time to review the terms. Many left to consult with their home governments. Vexstar remained in his seat, staring at nothing. A young aide approached him. "Hi, Chancellor. What should we do?" "What can we do?" Vexstar replied. "They've beaten us in every way that matters. Militarily, economically, morally. If we refuse these terms, we have nothing. At least this way, we survive." Over the next week, species began signing the new charter. Not all of them. Some chose independence, preferring to stand alone. Others formed smaller coalitions, but most recognized that the human proposal offered something the Council never had: genuine partnership. Commander Hannah established the first joint military academy, where Council species could learn human tactics, not to make war, but to defend themselves without relying on empires. "We're not trying to make you think like humans," she told her first class of alien cadets. "We're showing you that there are other ways to fight. Ways that don't require sacrificing your independence to some greater power." 10 years after the vote, Ambassador Haiyan Wu stood once again in the chamber on Nexus Station. The room was full again, but different. Species sat together by choice, not by hierarchy. Debates were loud and chaotic, but genuine. Decisions were made by consensus, not imperial decree. He addressed the gathering on the anniversary of what was now called Liberation Day. 10 years ago, you voted to destroy us. You thought you were preserving order, maintaining stability, protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. He smiled. Instead, you freed us. And in freeing us, you freed yourselves. Yes, the transition has been hard. Yes, there have been conflicts and disagreements. But look around this chamber. We're not subjects and masters anymore. We're partners, equals. That's what you gave us with your vote, even though you didn't mean to. Vexstar, no longer High Chancellor, but simply a delegate from the Drexian worlds, stood to speak. Ambassador Haiyan is correct. We did not intend to create this new order. We intended to crush humanity and preserve our empire. We failed in our goal, but perhaps we succeeded in something more important. We learned that strength isn't about domination. It's about cooperation. The chamber erupted in discussion, some agreeing, others arguing. It was messy and inefficient, and nothing like the ordered silence of the old council. It was, Haiyan thought, much better. Outside the station, human and alien ships patrolled together. In laboratories across the galaxy, human and council scientists worked side by side on problems that had seemed unsolvable for millennia. On trade stations, species that had never spoken as equals now negotiated deals as partners. The old galaxy was gone. The new one was chaotic, uncertain, full of possibility, and humanity had created it not through conquest, but through the simple refusal to accept a subordinate role. They had shown the galaxy that there was another way. Not the way of empires, not the way of hierarchy, the way of partners, of equals, of species working together, not because they were forced to, but because it was better than standing alone. Haiyan looked out at the stars through the chamber's massive windows. Somewhere out there, new species were developing technology. New civilizations were reaching for the stars. When they arrived, they would find a galaxy very different from the one humanity had encountered. They would find a galaxy where being young didn't mean being inferior, where being different didn't mean being dangerous, where species could stand as equals, regardless of their age or origin. And they would have humanity to thank for it, though fast. Any human would say the same thing. They weren't trying to change the galaxy. They were just being themselves. Sometimes, that was enough.